This is an episode that discusses memory and forgetting in Mage. We discuss the book There Is No Antimemetics Division, which is a book based on the SCP universe. But the first half of the show is entirely information on memory, the mind sphere, and mechanisms to roleplay that. So if you don't want spoilers for the book, kind of skip everything after 33:45, but there's an obvious change. We then circle back about 20 minutes later to talk about specifically adding those items to your Mage game. Also, this is a show about memory and forgetting. If those are sensitive topics for you, maybe you skip this one, but I think we do a reasonable job of handling it with care and the normal provisos of storytellers. Ask your players, darn it. On with the show. Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast. Joining me today is co-host of Mage the Podcast, Bryce Perry, and we are going to be talking about memory in the world of darkness. Bryce, how you doing?
Terry, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. How are you today?
I'm presentable. I think I will have a writing assignment out the door today, and it's one of those ones where once I do, I'll be like, yes, 2/3 of my main assignments will be completed. And it's one of those things where it's like, I submitted my first drafts around Thanksgiving. So like in a very real way, the person who wrote it and the person who is editing it are not the same.
Time changes us, even just a couple of months.
It's been like 1.5% of my life. And I know so much more about Exalted now in comparison. But what we're going to talk about today is memory in the world of darkness. And this came out of, I think, Bryce initially recommending to me the book There Is No Antimemetics Division by, I assume it's pronounced Quantum. QNTM.
That's how I pronounced it.
Yeah, an author by the name of QNTM. Links to that will be in the show notes. I like the idea and notion of SCP, but I don't like it in actuality. And this is the first like actual expression of it that I've enjoyed so far. I generally like things based on SCP and not SCP itself, like Triangle Agency and Control. I both very much enjoyed. And this was the first thing kind of said in that world that I actually enjoyed. How did it stumble upon your radar?
I'm pretty sure that I was reading a book on the Google Books app, and it was just a recommended, hey, you like weird nerd stuff. How about this weird nerd stuff?
You're in a basement. Try this.
That sounds good. And I it was like, $1 or whatever, because it's on Google Books. It's not a physical book. So I bought it, and I'm reading through it, and I get through the first chapter. I'm like, this sounds real familiar, ironically.
Yeah.
This sounds real familiar. And then I kept reading it, and I'm like, oh, this is an SCP book. I didn't know that going in. And it's only like tangentially SCP. And as I kept reading, I'm like, okay, there was definitely an episode of the SCP podcast that covered parts of this. And then whoever Quantum is, I don't know if they wrote the original entry or wrote on the SCP Wiki, or if they were involved in the podcast, or if they just took it and ran. But it's a massively expanded version of that.
I did like the thing where it's like, hey, I think I remember reading this before, because I have the other thing where there are certain parts of it where, ironically, I would forget what certain SCPs were for this. I'm like, wait, what actually is 55 again? I'd have to go look it up again. I'm like, I'm on to you. But like memory in the world of darkness is interesting because like it's premised on it being unreliable narrator frequently, which makes me want to tear my effing hair out. But yeah, what were your thoughts on it, just kind of starting with unreliable narrator?
I mean, in the world of darkness, that's like a feature, right? No, it's not really meant to be a bug.
It's really not.
It is, because it lets you decide the truth and what it really is for your table. And that keeps players like me, who have read all the books, it keeps them guessing because they don't know which unreliable narrator you've decided to side with.
Change it anyway. You're a god king. But like for me, I always looked at it and there was like a hierarchy of believability where like the rules are the rules. That's like the physics engine of the world. But even those are still optional. And then below that, you have like storyteller instruction where the developer is talking to the storyteller, like the Q&A section in Book of Secrets. You have this weird omniscient player instruction where this is a in-world character talking to an out-of-world reader. The narrator from Book of the Fallen comes to mind, where they have a particular voice and a particular opinion, but what they say isn't per se wrong. Then there's limited player instruction. This is when a character is notionally talking to a player character. And then finally we have in-world text where it's like two characters talking, and that is like the least believable. But memory pops up in a lot of different places in the world of darkness, and this is just like a brief survey of some of them. We have Arcane in Mage, the Mind Sphere. We have Anamnesis, practiced by the Macaulay, which gives them broad access to a vast expanse of historical memory. We have mnemosis practiced by the Mnemnoi in Wraith.
The first art that they ever banned, because Wraiths are all about their ties to their lives and their past. And if you can mess with those ties, that is just crazy powerful.
It's odd that that was the first one and not like LifeWeb, which does the same thing more directly, but that's me.
Does it do the same thing?
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, that was part of that weird giant plan where Charon would reincarnate and store his memories away. And then they had the Memnoi where they were like, these aren't the good people, you should stay away from them. And people stayed away from them so hard that they killed a bunch of them. And when Charon came back, he's like, where's all my memories, bruh? And they're like, well, see, we did too good.
We forgot.
Yeah. We have chicanery within Changeling, which has the ability to manipulate memory. Additionally, there's the remembrance trait in Changeling that represents kind of the knowledge of past Changeling lives.
Does it, though? It's called remembrance, and I'll grant it that, but I think that's about as far as it goes for memory. It's more of an etiquette dreaming, or maybe like the hypercram or dream background from Mage that lets you randomly have skills or whatever, because maybe in a past life you were a getaway car driver, so now you can use your remembrance skill to drive a car.
Hey, I'm just going off of what it's described as C20, where at 5 dots it's like clear, unbroken memories across several lives.
Yeah, C20.
Yeah, kids today. Additionally, in Changeling, we have the mists, which represent a wall of remembrance where the memory from the mundane world fades across in the dreaming, and vice versa. And I always had strong feelings about this, and we're going to talk about this more later.
Yeah, so the mists is kind of like the dreaming's immune system. It causes mortals who see changelings doing blatantly magical things or just being 9 foot tall and blue with big white horns or whatever. It just causes mortals to forget that they saw that after a little while, which might tie in to what we're discussing today.
Yeah.
So yeah, changelings are pretty good at memory manipulation.
And in addition to that, these are the other random mentions of memory that I could find. Mummies need to roll to see when they remember their past lives. V5 introduced the mechanic of memoriam, which lets you justify suddenly having a fact at hand by creating a little flashback scene created by friend of the show, Ken Height. Masters of the Art has years of wisdom, which grants automatic successes, assuming you can come up with a narrative reason why your action should just succeed. It also has the wistful flaw, where you just periodically get lost in memory. The Doge Calypse, the Archbishop of Madness within Werewolf. The only way to destroy them is by locating the tarnished brass box containing the name of the last person that they trusted. If you open it and read it, the memory returns to them, and they have to spend an hour purging it from their memory to return to being a Melgian incarnate. Magian? I can never remember how that's pronounced.
I like Malesian because it sounds, Malpheus.
We have past lives as a meritor ability, which represents something that I have strong feelings about and may or may not represent literal reincarnation or just weird little bits being stuck to you. I get bothered when backgrounds are like, well, here's the straight dope on the World of Darkness. And I'm like, no. That's not how that works.
I have a similar issue with past lives.
Yeah. It could be a literal reincarnation. Somehow your soul or something is recycled.
That's the least fun option, and it's the most contradictory with what we know about souls, as it were, in the World of Darkness.
Yeah, I always get thrown off when people are like, reincarnation is a thing. I'm like, no, reincarnation of avatars is a thing. Those little things, those little chunks seem to come back. Alternatively, it could be bits stuck to your avatar. I just said avatar. Bits stuck to your avatar.
It's the last airbender.
The avatar. Memories glom onto your avatar and get transmitted to your next self. These could be invented or they could be real. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because you're getting dice added to a dice pool.
That's the important part, is that you get a mechanical benefit. Then that's honestly what I always thought past lives were. It's your avatar remembering its previous incarnations, not like you personally, your soul was Jim's soul 20 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever. Although that does raise some questions about the shattered avatar merit.
Yeah, that one's a real weird one.
Or that's nothing but questions all the way down.
Exactly. Where it's like, do you want to spend 5 points when you could have spent those 5 points to just have 5 points in avatar? Well, have we got something for you? Or it could be something else entirely. Some sort of conduit connects you to the world of dreams, or a high umbral spirit, or the psychohistory of a place, or to a previous person even.
Yeah, but that's just the dream background. Or hypercram.
Yeah, and mechanically they're very similar to each other, where it's like, dice, go. In Revised, we got the adversarial background of Throwback, which was added to note times when having a past life, having a past life was considered a bad thing or interfered with your ability to function in the modern world.
Yeah, some of the adversarial backgrounds were good.
I think they were super fun. We also have Dream or Hypercram, which allows you to kind of go into a state where you gain temporary powers by opening yourself to the cosmos, taking advantage of preternatural abilities of memory, or being possessed by something temporarily. There's a whole bunch of ways you can skin this.
Yeah, I like the one where you just study real hard.
You need a montage,
Like,
though.
Tomorrow you're gonna have to do, brain surgery, so you just crack open those neurosurgery books and you just study real hard.
Neurosurgery for dummies, yeah. And then we have the Path of Occultation, which is practiced by the Ali Batin, where you erase yourself and become kind of one with the world. At the highest level, at level 9, it's like even your name written in stone will be quickly chipped away and erased by the wind.
And of course, that's just a more hardcore Batini extension of the arcane background where people forget that you exist when you're not around. And a character with Arcane 5 is impossible to find in a large box store unless you literally run into them. If you ask the cashiers or the people stocking the shelves, hey, have you seen this guy? They will not remember having seen that guy.
Yeah. The problem is Arcane has really been brought down a few levels in M20 where it's like, it doesn't work if you make yourself obvious. I'm like, no, that was the fun of Arcane.
Yeah, I can have Arcane 5 and walk around dressed as a clown and people will forget me as soon as I'm out of their direct line of sight.
Yeah.
That's the fun.
Yeah, people were like, you must dress sneakily. I'm like, no, that's what the Arcane is for.
Yeah, if I'm a ninja, I just have stealth.
So why play games around themes involving memory? They can present a challenge. Are you able to have a group separate player knowledge and character knowledge? I'm really bad at that, so I presume that no one else can. But that's me.
So, in my personal experience, this is going to be the hardest part for a lot of groups. Groups that I play with, either there's somebody who take notes about everything that happens. We went to the store, we ran into the cashier, her name was Brenda, she has 3 children. It's stuff like that will never come up again. Or you'll have nobody taking notes, and it's been a week since we played this game, and were we playing Mage? I thought we were playing Shadowrun. Dang! I brought my Orc Rocker character sheet. Crap, I gotta go home. So, the second option, though, where they don't take any notes, would actually make a memory game much easier than the first, because it relies on the storyteller to be the memory repository. And if you tell them, oh, no, that cashier, her name was Gladys, not Brenda, then they'll either believe you and go, oh, yeah, okay, Gladys, I must have misremembered that because, it's been a week for me, but it's been 4 minutes for my character. Or they'll be like, no, I'm definitely sure her name was Brenda. And then they'll start questioning everything, which you can either write off as being, a human with your own faulty memory, or you can tell them, yeah, that is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, some
anyway.
NWO bullshit. Every once in a while, I would have a player that got offended if we disagreed on a detail, even if I acquiesced to their being like, no, it was green. And I'm like, okay, it's green. And they just got angry at suddenly realizing the malleability of a fantastic world. And they're just like, ah! And I'm like, that is the weirdest thing to get hung up on.
Yeah, that's the oddest oddest thing to complain about.
One of the things I like about games of memory is it allows you to elevate dramatic irony if you remember something and your character can't for whatever reason. If it's your 4th time through the causality loop, this could be fascinating, terrifying, or downright boring.
I mean, to me personally, it sounds like it's going to be pretty boring if I, the player, know that it's the 4th time through, but my character does not. Then my character needs to react the same way every time. And now I'm no longer role-playing, now I'm just reading off of a script. Unless there's another PC or NPC who does know that this is our 4th time through and clues them in at the beginning of the loop or whenever they run into them for the first time in the loop. Because, then they can be like, look, we're in a Groundhog Day situation. When we meet this werewolf later, you're going to want to, but you absolutely positively must not kill them. Just trust me on this one. Yes, it's a werewolf. Yes, it's weird. Yes, he wants to kill you. Do not kill him.
Yeah, that's one where you're like, you're going to need these. And it's like a gun, a condom, and a COVID test. And it's just like, you're like, I've been through this time loop before. To me, one of the things that I found as I've gotten older is some of the weird vampire flaws start making more sense, like Toreador fascination or being stuck in memoriam or just kind of being unable to rise for the day because you don't want to spend the blood point. I may have mentioned this before, which again, irony in an episode on memory, is about 12 years ago, I had a pretty severe brain infection that absolutely hosed my memory compared to what it used to be. And I can tell very much that it changed me. I don't know if this is something where something else changed and my memory changed at the same time, or the change in memory changed me, or I was just getting older. That's kind of the nature of things. But it very much changed how I portrayed memory in games, and particularly the Marauders. Please see the episode I did with Travis Legg on the Marauders for more information on that.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had a really strong memory. I could remember word for word conversations that I'd had with friends and family weeks or months prior. And as I got older, I just lost that ability. I don't know if just because I have more in my brain to sift through, because, when you're 4, you only have so many experiences. And when you're 40, you have more than 10 times that many experiences. But it does suck not being able to remember, and remembering that when I was a kid, I had this ability. That sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do also get the strong vampiric desire to just stay in bed all day or look at some nice art like books and video games.
And you and I have pretty big heads. We should theoretically be able to store a lot. So,
one would think.
Yeah. Memory as a game mechanic allows an arena for characters to fill in their past. Leading questions that tie to a memory can be much more evocative to me. Compare Joey Toast is your enemy. Why to Joey Toast is your enemy? Tell me a memory that he invokes that makes you hate him.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be a technique used only for games about memory, of course. This is a great trick for any game that involves characters who have NPC ties, which should be any game. You say, Astral Jim, who is your mentor, is asking you for help. Tell me about a time in the past when you needed his help, and how does it feel to have those roles reversed? It's just a good way to build a character.
And to me, by adding the particular frame of memory, you tend to get a scene as opposed to a fact, which I tend to appreciate. So here are just some framing questions I have. What's a fond memory you have of your dead mentor?
Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind about your mother.
What was the first inkling your character can recall of magic existing?
What does your character most vividly recall from their experience with the werewolf?
Your character knows their memory has been manipulated. What is the giveaway that something's out of place?
You dive into the well of remembrance. What memory are you happiest to have come back?
The Lady of Sorrows demands that you give her a memory or terrible recollection. Which do you choose to present to her? So now we're just going to do some basic information about memory. Memory science is complicated and everyone kind of slices it up the different way. So standard caveat of these are things Terry got from a Wikipedia article and what he remembered from his high school AP Psych course roughly 25 years ago. Memory, quite simply, is the ability to encode, store, and retrieve information in all of its forms. Some definitions of memory do or don't include the non-brain components like embodied knowledge and endocrine response. And for more information on that, see A Memory Called Empire or An Empire Called Memory, which coincidentally is a book whose title I can never quite remember. We got some basic types: short-term memory, small amounts of information, generally lasts 20 to 30 seconds and can hold 5 to 9 items, easily disrupted. In Mage, we get contradictory information on what spheres would affect this, but to me, this is Mind 2 or 3 territory. Mind 3 effect could be retry. If done within an action, allows you to wipe someone's short-term memory and maybe try a social roll again. Again, only works for very short periods of time. The key here in this interpretation is Mind 3 allows you to kind of affect surface thoughts. And to me, short-term memory is always going to be surface because it's still right there. The moment you go beyond about 30 seconds, then it has the ability to start encoding.
Yeah, the technocracy has this effect. They call it the neuralizer. They make you forget that you just saw them use magic.
Yeah. Alternatively, a Mind 2 effect could influence encoding. Temper applies a certain emotional valence to everything that a person is encoding. The next time you interact with them, they may have a positive or negative rapport between the two of you.
Yeah, so Mind 2 lets you blood bond people.
Just a little le petit blood bond.
Yeah, like the first level blood.
First
bond,
one.
Like, they're going to worship you or anything.
Yeah,
that's a much higher mind level.
Is level 2 blood bond I can't quit you, or is that level 1?
Level 1 is I believe you just have like positive feelings toward them. You're not in love with them, but you're like, that guy's pretty cool. I'm going to tell all my friends about how cool that prince of the city is.
Then we have long-term memory, which is stored over long periods of time, potentially your lifetime. Seems to not have much of an upper limit. Like, we have theoretical ideas of what the total amount of memorable information one can have is. Tends to be more durable and harder to influence. To me, this is Mind 3 if the person is actively thinking about it. Again, it's that surface thoughts. Or Mind 4. Mage kind of differentiates it between feeling, surface thoughts, and subconscious. I'm like, there are just memories, but later description kind of imply that Mind 4 does that. So Mind 4, extract memory, pulls out and the deep memory, and you can do stuff with it.
Okay, but where do you put it? I know that when you say extract memory, you mean bring it to the forefront of their mind. But when I hear extract, I hear like pull it out of somebody's head and put it in a jar.
Yeah.
What level of correspondence would you need to put somebody's happiest memory of their mom on a USB drive? And would they still be able to access it without watching that USB drive?
To me, that would be Mind 4, Forces 3, Correspondence 4. Or you could do it with Data 4 because it has to be the equivalent there. But yeah, you could pull that out into a USB drive. Now, the problem is to have the Cronenberg-esque body horror where you take the USB drive, shove it back into them, and they gain the memory back. That's much more menacing.
They did that in Dollhouse as well.
There are subtypes of long-term memory. Episodic memory is a type of long-term memory that remembers a large body of facts about a specific event. Previously, we talked about flashbulb memory, where you had a very clear idea of a particular scene, but those aren't necessarily accurate. It is a large corpus, but kind of remember that every time that something is recalled, it has the potential to be changed. It is this weird phenomenon where the tape is brought out, you hit play, and it's being recorded to another tape. So you can always interfere with that encoding process when something is being recalled. The other one is procedural memory, which is how to perform specific tasks like typing or riding a bike. This seems to require Mind 5, which allows the raising and lowering of traits. My guess is this is because it's complicated, involves the embodied aspect. That is to say, memories aren't just facts. Again, they also involve proprioception, which is kind of your relationship to your body, to yourself, as well as endocrine response, like what other chemicals and neurotransmitters and such and hormones were kind of flowing in your body.
Yeah, you can use Mind 5, or you can just use my favorite background mentioned earlier, Dream.
Domain. Oh, Dream.
I always forget about Domain. Dang. Second favorite background.
It does so much. I'll direct people to our episode on affect theory. But affect is how your body responds to something. Emotion, on the other hand, is when memory and experience are added to that bodily response. In that episode, we talked about using life to dim the embodied response of a memory. So you can use life 3 to bring up a painful memory without someone lashing out, or to create a Capgras delusion where someone doesn't quite recognize someone because they don't have the appropriate physiological response when they see a loved one. So let's talk about the phenomenon of forgetting. There are a few different causes. One is decay. This is the fading of memory traces over time. There's interference, which is the disruption of memory by other information, and this can go forward or backward. We have retroactive interference. New information interferes with older information, or proactive interference. Old information interferes with new information, or there could just be a retrieval failure. The memory is in there somewhere, but the cues required to bring it back aren't there. Preventing someone from remembering something could be Mind 2 or 3, or Life 3 to interfere with the hardware of encoding, which I think is kind of a neat thing to play with.
So what level or combination of spears would you want to change the cues that somebody uses to recall something? Like if you only want them to remember that they have a wife when they see a pineapple, or to only recall that they have a secret mission when they hear a certain code phrase, Manchurian Candidate style.
Yeah. So that kind of subliminal programming, previously in Mage, they indicated that was like Mind 5, which I think is way too high, which is one of the cases where I think the modern one is lower. The other interpretation for me would be that is essentially a triggered effect. So that winds up being time 4, entropy 4, mind something, depending on how deep that cue is being. I don't like the time 4 aspect of it. I really wish it were just kind of like mind or mind and entropy, but that's just me. I don't think you need anything for the sensory aspect of it, but that's just me. I don't feel as if you necessarily need life involved in there, but that would be my reading.
Good deal.
Then we have the phenomenon of false memories, which are memories that did not actually occur. This can be caused by people simply being suggestible, misinformation, and the malleability of memory. You could recall a childhood event that never happened or misremember details of a real event. All memories are constructed and all memories are reconstructed. So we're really good at filling in the blank parts of the tapestry, and the way we do that may vary. And if the cues change, the way we fill in that blank space may change as well.
Yeah, makes sense. This is how you get a satanic panic, which, now that I'm thinking about it, might actually be a good paradox effect for somebody who is trying to edit somebody else's memories, because now the somebody that they're editing will have recovered memories, quote unquote, of the Mage being part of some huge global conspiracy, which, as we all know in Mage, is just nonsense.
Yeah, no one's able to coordinate anything much larger than a child's birthday party.
Exactly.
So to me, the thing that gets messy here is editing or manipulating memory. Do you need time to be involved? To me, a lot of this stuff is clearly Mind 4. Mage kind of works with the idea that forgotten memories are somehow still in there, and can be brought back, or at least that is what I read into some of the description of some of the memory and thought manipulating rotes. So your storyteller may or may not require time to go back. One way to instill a false memory could simply be to interfere with an existing one, causing confusion or distraction. With Mind 3, to simply flood someone kind of with imagery. This would take considerable research to be able to come up with appropriate images that would throw someone off, as opposed to being misremembered as a kind of weird dream.
If you forget something, that implies that it was at one point known. So another failure could be caused by preventing something from being encoded in the first place. A Mind 3 effect could make something unrememberable. Similarly, you could use life to interfere with the machinery of senses to prevent something from being functionally seen.
Yeah, I really like the idea that you create an object that is unrememberable because it is in such a form that the eye cannot kind of process it. There was a similar thing that occurred in one of William Gibson's books where he has the ugly shirt, which is this thing that can't be recorded because it takes advantages of the way like CMOS sensors record things to just kind of give this blurry non-outline. And I kind of like the biological equivalent of that. And Bryce, you look like you have an idea.
Yeah, there was an episode of X-Files where the creature of the week was a guy who murdered people by hiding in their blind spot. Because, at the center of your eye, you have a blind spot that your mind fills in with information from the other eye, or just, because what's around you. So he had an ability to expand that so that he was always in somebody's blind spot.
The other area where memory, to me, can logically be played with in a way that I think is fun and unique to Mage is with quiet paradox and encountering with the impossible. Mage toys with the idea that certain things affect memory in ways beyond the mundane. Mages are both human and magical, so all of these mechanisms that we've talked about can be interfered with. This could be known or subtle. It could just be a phenomenon that mages deal with and talk about, or it could be something much more intimate and either concerning or humanizing. The first one for me is quiet. This is a paradox manifestation inside of the mage and could include modified memories. For instance, at low levels, it could mean that you always remember that your husband has brown eyes, even though they have blue eyes. This may just cause mild annoyance, or it may cause you slight distress every time you see their eyes as you realize your memories are wrong. At higher levels, you may forget that you're married. At very high levels, you may think that you're married to someone else and may view this other person as an intruder, which can create I'm just going to say tense situation.
Another quiet effect could be a scrambled timeline where you clearly remember that your fourth grade happened before second grade, and you regularly confuse 2 years of your life. Or your character has false memories of the future that feel more real than just a dream. For example, they remember the Zigralgulgur attack of 2033 as if it was only yesterday, despite it not having happened, or not having happened yet.
There could be a lacuna or a hole in your memory. This is a clear hole that your character notices. It may move or be stationary. You may never remember what you had for lunch today until at least 2 days have passed. At higher level, there could be a lost decade or a moving window that you're just not familiar with. Another manifestation we get are hobgoblins, which at high levels, your memory has been sequestered and forms a hobgoblin. Your teenage years literally manifest as a thought form that you can only access by talking to this hobgoblin.
Teenage hobgoblin you is a huge jerk and is very disappointed with how your life.
You sold out, man. Maybe periodic attacks from hobgoblins could steal thoughts instead of doing physical damage. You may have to feed them small memories, but eventually they'll come for the big stuff and demand the precious ones unless you're able to deal with your quiet in time.
And you should just go ahead and give them those memories because, after all, once they're gone, you won't miss them.
Have you ever had the phenomenon of remembering that you remembered something, but not being quite sure what it was? Like you have a memory of the phenomenon.
It's maddening.
Yes.
Yes.
It's the existential equivalent of like having a little bit of a song stuck in your head.
I think I'd rather have the song stuck in my head because I can just look up the rest of the song.
I had the bagpipe reprisal of Wasted Youth is Better by Far Than a Wise and Productive Old Age from Bat Out of Hell, Part 2, Bat Back Into Hell by Meatloaf, probably for about 14 years. And I was glad I was finally able to place it.
I had Peter's leitmotif from Peter and the Wolf stuck in my head from fourth grade until I graduated college. And it still occasionally just pops back in there. I'll be walking around and I'll find myself humming it. And it's
that one?
That's the one.
Okay.
That is the one. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I will be sure to insert that into the episode.
Just softly in the background sometimes while I'm talking.
There may be a memory barrier. A character whose quiet drops may not remember what they did at higher levels of quiet. This may involve having to elevate their quiet if they need access to a particular piece of information, or remembering to elevate their quiet and someone's like, I know you're insane right now, but we really need you to write the password down. Thank you.
I like the idea that the character does write down the password, but it's in a language you can only read if you were equally in quiet or...
Oh, yeah, it only makes sense at Clarity 4. I think quiet is one of the most underdeveloped systems in Mage, in my opinion, and in an X5 version of Mage, that's probably what I would lean on. I would de-emphasize paradox and emphasize quiet. Pardon me. I would de-emphasize paradox backlashes, because they're both forms of paradox, but I would emphasize probably quiet a bit more, but that's just me. Maybe the only way to reduce one's quiet may be to banish certain memories that bring on the quiet. Your character needs to seal off a part of themselves to be able to function in the world.
Locked in magical madness you is also a huge jerk and disappointed in how you turned out.
Kind of a recurring theme in this episode.
Paradox may also impair certain trait rolls like perception, wits, dexterity, manipulation, or intelligence due to concussion because you hurted your brain. Paradox can be influenced by memory, so the demon that accosts you has the voice of a hated teacher or figure of authority, taking that information directly from your memory. Or, maybe worse, they have the voice and face of a loved one, and they say mean things to you.
And they're disappointed in you.
Paradox may affect how memory is encoded. Anything experienced during a particular backlash may have the wrong color or description, or can only be remembered in reverse. The force's backlash causes you to become physically cold whenever you remember your dreams, and in them everything is slightly wreathed in an aura of icy flame.
Another thing we get is the idea that memory is changed on encounter with the impossible. The figure of speech Mage uses is, things man was not meant to know. And it's one of those things where, like, I do wish there were a single syllable term for, like, people, because man frequently just has a better prosody to it, but I want to be gender inclusive in discussions of
folks.
Things. Yeah.
Things folk was not meant to know.
Thing folk were not meant to know.
No. Things folks was.
Folks was. Got it.
If you're going to use folks, you got to be folksy.
So Mage suggests that there are odd things out there that we were not meant to know, and we don't really get a solid system on it, but we do get a suggestion in the core rulebook. But this is another avenue to toy with memory. If something crazy is remembered, it takes another memory out at random. You recall the face of the demon, and suddenly you can't remember how to use trig functions. Maybe that memory is a sinkhole, slowly sucking in everything around it and drawing in memories before and after the encounter of that day. So you attempt to remember the encounter with Shub-Niggurath or whatever, and the days before and after are slowly starting to fade.
Well, to be fair, in comparison with meeting an Eldritch entity from beyond space and time, yeah, those other memories, they're just more mundane.
Yeah.
They're not going to have as much of an impact on you. I'm like, oh yeah, I met an elder god. I had cornflakes for breakfast.
I was about to make a cornflakes reference. That was kind of weird.
Renewed my driver's license. Met a separate elder god. Day-to-day activities.
The memory could just be rejected, leaving a smooth area within your memory, and that you just have to kind of infer based on what is around that as to what to do.
I really like that idea a lot, where you remember eating your cornflakes and renewing your driver's license, and then when you try to remember anything that happened between like 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, it's just the memory equivalent of static or feedback or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 2 o'clock, you're in your car driving home. Yay. There's a show on Apple TV that kind of covers that. It's
Severance?
called Severance, yeah.
And the thing I kind of like about this is Mage also gives us a bunch of avenues to literalize memory, where we have Mind 3, which allows us to enter the mindscape of someone in quiet, where every memory issue can become a quest unto itself, where we have the ability to literalize our internal parts. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if a character went to Uranus or Neptune, I can never remember which is which and which one is tied to the shader realm of mind, and suddenly their memory becomes a landscape they can explore. Or you have the Well of Remembrance in the High Umbra, which lets you kind of dive in and remember those bits. One of the neat comments I saw was, in Mage, every attempt at memory can become a quest unto itself, and I kind of like that. Any thoughts on the mechanics of memory or Mage before we talk about There Is No Antimemetics Division?
Now let's hop into it.
Okay, this is a book by an author, Quantum. It is available under Creative Commons, which we will link in the show notes. The book regards the Antimemetics Division, so let's talk about some key terms.
A meme is an idea or discrete thought that is inclined to spread. So a catchy song or a good recipe, compelling idea, these are all memetic. They spread.
A memeplex is a collection of memes that tend to travel together. A belief set like a religion, a paradigm, a way of life could all be a memeplex, and they tend to reproduce as a group. If there's 4 of them and you've got 3, it tends to imply the fourth one. So they tend to reinforce each other.
A counter meme is a meme that wipes out another meme. So in There Is No Antimemetics Division, they say that you would know if you had it. It would be impossible not to know. You would feel electrified by it, driven forward by the high ideal it represented every waking moment. It's what should have brought you here. I don't know how you made it here without it.
This is talking about a particularly infectious and destructive meme and whether or not there could be a counter meme powerful enough to destroy it. A anti-meme is something with a self-censoring property, like a password where you don't want it to get out. It is information that prevents its own spread.
Antimemetics, building off of that, is the study of anti-memes and occurred as an outgrowth of World War II research to figure out how to prevent ideas like fascism from spreading. And I got to make a personal note here. Great job, Antimemetics Division.
They tried. They blew up themselves and they forgot that they existed. The recurring theme of like having to rediscover antimemetics is kind of a fun one. Amnestics are a method to make someone forget. This may include occult rituals, gas, injectables, surgical methods, but the most common method used in the book are drugs. There's a class of drugs that can help you forget. They can prevent the spread of a hostile meme. Maybe a particular memory is so invasive that that area of the brain that contains it goes into overdrive, consuming oxygen. It literally causes cerebral hypoxia if you don't forget it fast enough. So an idea that once you think about it, just kind of starts causing bashing damage until you have the ability to some way get it out of your head.
Contrary to amnestics, we have nestics, which is a class of drug that lets you remember. They also have the property that you can't forget to take them unless something intervenes. So at the far end of the spectrum, you're incapable of forgetting and your brain burns out. A class Z mnestic is so potent, the only way to stop it is to decapitate.
They grew out of research into basically youth drugs and regenerating memory pathways. We get the idea of the noosphere and the ara orun, which I find interesting is the Yoruba word meaning sleeper. I'm like, that word is taken in Mage. This is the space of ideas. This allows you to persist as a memetic entity after death and allows you to kind of loosely project a force ghost phantom thing. This is kind of the book's combination of like the high and low umbra with a little bit of the dreaming thrown in. An example was Marion Wheeler used strong nestic medication nearly every day of her life. Among the identity warriors of Mobile Task Force Omega Naught, Ara Orun, it was never in doubt that on occasion of her death, she would ascend into the noosphere. She would become a Beta Romaine inframorphic entity of type 4, volitional spiritual apparition, or a ghosty, or however she wished to describe her new self. Then, when she joined the Citizens of Heaven and continued the Antimemetics Division fight from higher ground, likely with fearsome effectiveness. And that's just one of those science fiction sentences where it's like, how many things can we cram in?
I think they could have crammed in a little more.
They could have crammed in a little bit more.
They didn't even mention the shoulder of Orion. I mean, come on. Are they trying?
Like tears in rain. This book also specifically mentions a few SCPs, which we will kind of describe. We won't go into extensive detail, but this is kind of the idea of entities that you could introduce into your game that have antimemetic properties and kind of how to magify them a little bit.
So we'll start with SCP-4987, which is a memory eater that follows around one of the main characters. SCP-4987 is constantly consuming bits of trivia just to keep itself fed. Sometimes it'll overfeed, and it's suggested in the book that she can sick it on someone else. So in Mage terms, this could be a 3-dot familiar that consumes memories instead of quintessence, or quintessence in the form of memories. It may have charms that allow you to retry actions or avoid mental trauma, and be a perfect courier. You can move a piece of information, then have it extracted. It may also be related to a data fight, which is slowly eating the digital web. In the book, there's a line where one character mentions, "That's Clay's gun." He deadpans, "You stole it from him." And Marion responds with, "It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing." Marion explains, unloading it and carefully setting it down. But stealing a firearm and then stealing their memory of the theft is a little easier. Like I said, a pet. Some pets are dumb enough that they can be trained.
And then we get SCP-3125, which is a powerful hostile memetic entity that once you know about it, it knows about you and generally kills you. It's slowly invading our reality, and the issue is that the research on it kills those who research it. It slowly perverts meaning until it renders concepts like life and civilization meaningless. It comes from a different type of what they refer to as ideatic space, an idea that is so self-reinforcing and so evil that it has the ability to kind of rewrite reality. And I like the fact that this kind of suggests that there are meme wars that are taking place among memetic entities. And we never really get a description to it too much, except for it's kind of spidery. And that's kind of one of the recurring themes in the book, like spiders. Also too many fingers. I should have brought in the finger demon.
SCP-2256 was a species of animal that was able to grow to a kilometer or more tall, and that had inherent antimemetic properties that acted as a camouflage. A particular herb rendered them visible, but extended observation caused them to die. Their bodies had monastic properties, and they were classified as C. gigantes. And we have to use the past tense here, but because of their inherent abilities, there could be one in your backyard right now, and you would not be able to know that.
Yeah. The idea here is that the herb that rendered them visible was the forerunner of some of the first nestic drugs. And these things were absolutely giant, and their body parts were used to create certain things that would prevent you from forgetting or to isolate you in an ideatic space so that SCP-3125, the giant hostile memeplex, couldn't find you. And in my head, they were giant giraffes. What did they look like to you?
So in my head, they were more like brontosaurs.
Okay.
Because a giraffe implies, something friendly looking. You can look at it and be like, oh, look, it's got little stubby horns, a little furry
They're
on
called
them.
ossicones, thank you.
Yeah, them. But no, in my mind, they were more dinosaurian because I think it said that they've been around for millions of years. They're literally indescribable. So
Yeah.
they're very tall.
If you describe them, the very act of writing it down seems to harm them, which I find kind of interesting. Which I think would be an interesting thing where like this indescribable terror is attacking you, and the best thing you can do to stop it would be to stop and do like a police sketch artist of it, or to like write a song about it.
Oh man, Lovecraft, you could have fixed all this yourself if you if you just had better adjectives.
SCP-1425 is a book that purports to have self-help property, but that kind of indoctrinates you into a cult that partially involves spreading it. These ideas were originally presented in a book, and then later on a cult starts turning them into videos, which allows it to spread very quickly. They mentioned that there were two ways to deal with this. One is a memetic method. Another one is a physical intervention where they just kill the entire cult that is kind of trying to get this to spread out into the world.
I personally love the idea of this kind of memetic gray goo, which, it's an idea that replicates again and again in your mind until it's the only thing that you or anybody else can think about. It just seems like an interesting form of antagonist for a game.
Literally to the point where people who are sufficiently taken over by it kind of go into this rigor mortis or lockjaw or tetanitis state where they're just kind of frozen, except for the agents that it is actively controlling to help perpetuate itself.
I also like the fact that it comes in the form of a self-help manual, because I can definitely see it as like a pyramid scheme kind of thing, where you're drawn in to, improve your life. It does literally the exact opposite of improving your life.
Yeah, and they talk about it teaching you how to harness the vibrations of the stars. So, like, if you want to make the Huija or the Thalhund much more menacing, I think that's an interesting direction that you can certainly go with that. Or, like, yeah, Kuvan is actually this vibrational frequency trying to take over all of humanity, and you get to be the anti-memetic agents to try and stop it. And you and your, like, weird sorcerer friends have to do it, yeah.
Another SCP is SCP-055, which is an object that degrades all information about it, so it can only be talked about in negative terms. Periodically, it is rediscovered, and everybody just goes crazy about that because that's how it works.
Yeah.
And when I say talked about in negative terms, I don't mean like, man, SCP-055 is a bully, and he smells bad, and I hate him. You have to talk about it like a negative space, like SCP-055 is not an animal. SCP-055 is not a vegetable. SCP-055 is not a mineral. You have to describe what it is not. You cannot describe what it is.
I like the technocracy needing to figure that out and having this weird set of charts and diagrams that kind of convey that, or alternatively having those little like safety logos like that indicate that something is sharp or pressurized for like different kinds of memetic horrors and so on, and just being like, caution, cognitive decay field in progress or something like that, and it having a cute little symbol that clearly indicates that's like Osho proved.
Right, clearly, you look at it. Well, it's a meme.
Yeah.
So it conveys all that information instantaneously. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Then my favorite is SCP-9429. It is a memorial to a group of ancient humans that flourished about 120,000 years ago with very advanced technology. They first encountered SCP-3125, that giant destructive memeplex that is trying to destroy humanity and take over our reality. But in the fight with 3125, their culture was antimemetically contaminated, which prevents anyone without protection or taking a nestic from remembering anything about it. So the answer to the question of were there older civilizations was yes, but we can't remember them. Atlantis is all around us. We just don't have the ability to remember it. And this is referred to as the First Antimemetics War. They left a memorial possibly as their last act. It is a single stone, unbroken, 91 by 91 by 147 meters, a vertical cuboid of ancient weathered dark basalt. It sits at a very slight angle, leaning fractionally to the north. Its regular angles clearly mark it as a carved object, a human-made artifact. It rises out of the forest east of Site 41 and dominates, not to say obliterates, the view in that direction from the windows of the site's main block. It is by volume massively bigger than the site itself, even including its underground extents. It looms and is absolutely unmissable. The idea that anyone could fail to notice it for a period of time is, Wheeler would have to admit, more than a little unnerving. So it is this giant stone cube that you can't remember without assistance. So I just like the idea.
It's not a cube.
Rectangular prism.
Thank you. Look, you can't have 3 different measurements and be a cube.
It only has 2 different measurements. It's 91 by 91 by 147. It's a prism. But yeah, so the idea is that you could have this very obvious set of artifacts, but only to a small group of people that was able to see them. You get the idea in the book that a fleetingly small number of humans have natural immunity against amnestic items. Any other items or devices in it that you kind of want to bring up? Any of the containment sites, or maybe the weird alien that they would put over their eyes to remember or forget things?
I enjoyed and I forget what exactly they called it in the book because you've read the book more recently than I have, the chamber that they go to where they can remember things that they could not remember outside of the chamber and vice versa. And it's huge and it's white and it's made of some kind of material that they don't really recognize. It's not stone, it's not wood. And as you continue to read, you realize, and I think that they eventually come right out and tell you that it is the interior of the skull of a member of SCP-2256.
Yeah, the sea gigantes.
The giant animal that you can't remember even after you look at it. Even when that creature is no longer alive, its remains have these properties that you can use.
Yeah. And the idea is basically that the problem with realizing that SCP-3125 exists is that it then knows you exist and it kills you. So the only place it has infiltrated more or less all of reality with its sensory apparatus. So this chamber, just almost by accident, they discover that within the skull of C. gigantes, they can talk about it, but now they have to create this containment procedure that every time you go in or out, or every time you go out, your memory of what is in it is purged. So you have to constantly be leaving notes to future selves to bring them up to speed quickly. So characters are constantly reading reports that they wrote to themselves, knowing that the next time they encounter it, they will have no memory of what it was previously. So I think that is an interesting puzzle of how you would set that up. I'm not sure how I would emulate that at the table, except for to have like, hey, you have 10 minutes to scroll down all the information that you possibly could, and hoping that you're good at role-playing or something.
I was going to say the best way that I would recommend is have the characters enter the chamber and then reel missing, and then the characters exit the chamber and they have no idea what happened in there. But I don't know, my players might be like, well, I turn around and go right back in. What happens? Well, you exit again.
Yeah, this lost time segment. And I like the idea that that could be a background element, that is just to reinforce if you work in some sort of memory or mind manipulation or antimemetic division within the technocracy or a tradition group or a government agency or something like that, that is just used to kind of set feel. That it's like, yeah, you did something for 7 hours in there. You're absolutely exhausted. There's a small amount of blood in your mouth, but you did your job.
You taste pennies.
Yeah. So you want to talk about what we liked about the book?
Yeah, I really liked the idea that there could have been multiple memory-based apocalypses in the past that we just can't remember, because the book is about an ongoing crisis, an ongoing war apocalypse that the average person is just entirely unable to fight in because they can't even comprehend it. They can't see it happening around them. People get eaten by monsters, and the people who weren't eaten by monsters just forget that those people were ever around.
Yeah, there's an ending segment of the book where they talk about, hey, there's these 3 years that seem to have not happened, and there's these massive areas of cities that no one seems to be able to remember or look into. And this is after the nth destruction of the Antimemetics Division, and the future SCP is trying to piece this together, and it being like, something crazy happened. It looks like we stopped it, but we're not sure what went on. And I like the idea that you have an organization, whether it be the traditions, the technocracy, or something else, that maybe stopped a massive nephontic infiltration or the most potent marauder outbreak ever. They don't know how they did it. They only realize that they did. And the only evidence is that there are these missing bits.
And that's what happened to Atlantis. It's sitting right there in the ocean. We just always manage to skirt around it, except for the times that we don't. And that's when ships go lost in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. Or we encounter it all the time. It's constantly being rediscovered, but then no one has any memory of it. It's that idea that it's memetically contaminated, like SCP-9429.
I also liked the idea that there were places, people, and things that we could see every single day of our lives, and that when we see them, they might very well just scare the absolute bejesus out of us. But then we blink or they move off to the side and we just completely forget that we saw them. So why was I late for work today? Well, traffic was bad. Why was traffic bad? Well, I don't really know, because by the time I got to the front of the traffic slowdown, whatever it was had cleared up. But the people at the front of the traffic slowdown, they were watching some weird fanged monster just, walk across the freeway. And they slammed on their brakes, obviously, because that's freaky. But by the time that the monster was across the freeway, they'd forgotten about it and they just went about their day. But now there's a slowdown, regular city traffic.
And similarly, I like the idea of continual rediscovery. The nature of anti-memes is that they keep having you forget them and rediscovering them. You're never more prepared than you were on your first day. That it is very hard to get better at this job, that reflexes can be honed and so on, but you are basically selected before your ability to probably correctly respond in the first place. One of the things that happens is we get periodic updates as to how large the Antimemetics Division is, and as time goes on, it just keeps shrinking because of these encounters with SCP-3125. So by the end of it, it's just like a handful of people when previously there had been thousands. I like the idea that to fight a memetic entity, you need a counter meme, which is more powerful. So incredibly powerful, you can't help but spread it. And that seems to me one of those things where the cure could be worse than the disease in a particular way.
The cure for whatever this horrible creature was. Turns out, yep, that's where capitalism came from. It's not a great idea, but it stopped the spread of whatever was worse.
Yeah, maybe we don't have you be my co-host for my Syndicate episode.
I love the Syndicate. They're my favorite. How dare you?
I also like the fact that it turns the notion of sense and memory kind of on its head. What do we do to work around that feeling of having a missing idea? So going through this, obviously, it was kind of interesting. It's set in a world where there aren't really supernatural powers per se. There are weird entities out there, but at the end of the day, just about every mortal is just kind of mortal. The agents of the SCP Foundation do have access to weird items and sometimes use one weird thing to counter another weird thing, but we're mages. We have magic. So what could this be? I like the idea of reinterpreting certain areas of the other world as being kind of hyper-memetic. What if instead of a place of forgetting, the dreaming is a place so utterly infectious that we need to watch it closely for incursions into regular space and need to periodically dose people with amnestics to forget about it. If your job is to patrol the dreaming, you have these little like dreaming rad meters, like the Zoomy meters worn at nuclear power plants, which change color. And when you do, you have to take your meds to forget that this is an area so compelling that people eventually just kind of succumb to bedlam in a way that is infectious. Or maybe there is a marauder with a special version of the reality sync or sanity sync flaw where it spreads to other people. Everett volumes may have different different memetic properties. These are areas within the mirror zone. One could witness an alternative religion or song or idea that starts spreading, and it breaks out into a sleeper population. You need to put that idea down. The noosphere could be a place that kind of blends the Maya, the high umbra, and the low umbra, where someone's information could persist after them. Maybe this is what control is. Maybe the previous Council of the Nine became memetic entities after the Avatar Storm. There's a place where ideas fight instead of merely the high umbra. In the high umbra, generally it is mortals influencing what the entities there do. But what if it went the other way around, and there are these alien dark entities that are trying to infiltrate their way into the mind space of humanity, and part of what mages do is to keep them out.
Yeah, this sounds like a great idea for the more earthbound members of the Void Engineers to have to deal with. See our previous episode, Planetside, Void Engineers on Earth. Mages could also have memetic weapons, like there are amnestic grenades. You throw one, and when it goes off, people completely forget what they were going to do. You could have memetic bombs that destroy ideas, which would render an entire area unthinkable. You could have anti-memetic cloaking, so only mages with mind magic can remember and everyone else forgets it as soon as they look away. This could be a they live kind of scenario where an orphan wakes up and suddenly starts seeing anti-memetic entities. Much in the way that Marauder's quiet moves throughout the world, mages could be easily identifiable to others because manifestations of quiet are very obvious to mages. The NWO could have a sister organization that they don't even know about that investigates anti-memetic outbreaks. Control is actually that entity, but anything beyond the rumors disappear from memory. They seem ominous and omnipresent, but only because no details about them can be remembered. There could be a counter-memetic gun, which is a rifle that once somebody is struck by it, a certain type of action becomes impossible. They are unable to rebel or resist or defy, or maybe they cannot follow orders given to them. This would be an Entropy 4 Mind 5 effect that essentially fires a very specific type of geisha.
I like the idea that that's kind of what control is, that there are these organizations that are only hazily known just because they can't be remembered. Within Mage, these could be innovations that occurred because of a paradox backlash.
Wasn't it canon in one of the Ascension scenarios that Control just literally became a faceless group that was in charge of the technocracy after they were stuck in the Umbra for so long after the Avatar Storm? Am I misremembering that?
No. And then you had the Greater Viasilicos as a thing. So you're like the super spheres. I just like that it always came back to the Viasilicos. Throughout all of Mage history, we've had 4 original ideas, and we're just kind of recladding them. I also like the one in, what was it, Guide to the Technocracy, where Control was essentially a giant, like, BBS, where you would just, like, send out a thing, and that every day you would get polled on 20 or 30 things if you were, like, a T4 or above, and that is what Control was, that combination of things.
Yeah, Control is the collective unconscious.
Yeah, but there it was the collective conscious, where it was like, it was literally expressed kind of in emails and so on, where it's like, not another meeting. But but I like the idea, though, that Mage Sight is this real thing that allows you, that magic itself is anti-memetic, and that's why people don't remember your fireballs being launched or something like that. And that one of the common paradox backlashes could be the fact that not only do people forget the fireball they launched, but they forget who you are. So the thing that draws you into Mage Society is those are kind of the only people that will remember you if you choose to use vulgar magic. And yes, I just reinvented sidereals, I understand.
I was going to say that makes the Tawny much more difficult to play. Why won't anybody notice me?
Yep. People are suddenly pulling these Tyler Durden level effects to try and be remembered or not. But I think it's a fertile area for things like paradox backlashes and so on. I mean, you have the X-Men character for Forget Me Not, which Professor X has a post-hypnotic reminder to remember that he exists every once in a while, which I thought was kind of funny. Are you familiar with the character Forget Me Not?
Yes, that was
okay.
I'm an excellent actor. Thank you.
Acting! This is a fertile area to play with. I think we could have anti-memetic agents, a small class of agents that exist strictly as information. They more or less can't die as long as someone knows about them, and they kind of become something like legends. They could be corruptible over time in the same way that regular spirits can be.
Secret agent on courage.
Exactly. Who can't die unless his information is erased. And then suddenly characters with the domain background have the ability to kind of live this dual life wandering in regular space and memetic space, and suddenly we have reason to have the domain background. Kind of another idea that's brought up in the book is that there are some ideas that are so large that kind of a human head, a human brain can't quite contain them. And this could be where magic or the avatar comes in. Ascension may be a type of uplift where humanity can finally understand some sort of cosmic truth to create a new type of entity. Or we could just be exposing ourselves to SCP-3125 and be immediately decapitated in the second Antimemetics War.
Why not both?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you think that you're doing something great and you're going to uplift humanity, but it turns out that the creature, the idea of a creature that gave you this thought is a memetic predator who, once you've infected enough people, will just eat all of you.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things like, what is it? The Reavers from the Mass Effect universe, where people periodically discover this hyper-advanced technology, which they think is improving them, but ultimately it just kind of allows this other species to come over and be like, nope, that was our stuff, actually, and now we control everything.
I've never played a Mass Effect game.
Neither have I, but I've fallen into a wiki hole once or twice. It's kind of like my relationship with most horror movies, where it's like, no, I can tell you what happens. I haven't seen it, though.
I have listened to a podcast about it.
Yeah. That's a level of understanding that we try and give. It's just, this is just our podcast talking about other podcasts that we've also listened to. So any other thing? Bryce, in addition to this, we've got some listener questions and comments, which we'll now go through. Pukaji asks, as a storyteller, how do you handle memory manipulation, both as narrative element and from a player sensitivity perspective? The second part, first, player sensitivity. Anyone who's dealt with abuse, gaslighting, or cognitive impairment may have had bad experiences with the notion of memory. If you're going to have a game that involves dicking around with what people are going to be thinking, tell them. I have heard stories of absolutely amazing games where storytellers were steadily gaslighting their players until there was a reveal and everyone went, haha, that's pretty awesome. I would never do that. That's me. Bryce, any thoughts for how to do this safely and effectively?
Know your players. I wouldn't recommend doing this at a convention game where you have 4 random people sit down at your table, but if, like me, you have a group that you've played with for years, and even then, make sure that it's okay ahead of time, like Terry said. I had a game where a character, it's a superheroes game, he was playing a character called the Gray Ghost. He was able to turn invisible and manipulate darkness and stuff like that. Turned out, toward the end of the game, he had actually died before becoming a superhero, and he was in fact a ghost, and he had no idea. But that's why his powers caused people to forget him, and that's why his family did not talk to him anymore. And when it turns out that he was dead all along, it was a major reveal. And it's one of the things that I'm really proud of as a game master, because
nice.
I sowed the clues so many times.
Yeah.
And people kind of sort of picked up on, well, that's weird. But
character looks suspiciously like Bruce Willis.
Until it was spelled out, it was not a thing that he really got.
For other games that deal with memory more directly, Nibiru and Mummy the Curse both deal with this with a little more specificity. Are there any games that you know of that are a bit more memory focused that may have mechanics or ideas that we can draw on?
Oh man, there was one that came out several years ago now. I think it was called Anathema. I could be wrong on the name. I know it started with an A. I got it, picked up a copy at Gen Con. It was basically Highlander, the role-playing game.
Huh.
So you had to deal with, how did you know this other character in the Regency period? How did you know this character in the Old West kind of stuff? So something like that might be handy. I will get the name and I will let you know.
Free Market, A Penny for Your Thoughts, Lost Days of Memory and Madness, and Cyrun are also listed when I quickly Google it, so I don't know about them. The second question was, there are so many terms that end in eem now, mytheme, nareem, that stem from the emic-etic distinction, but add an implication of being spreadable. Each of them spreads in its own way with a unique set of processes and effects. A game that deals in the memetics of myth will unfold differently than a game dealing with the memetics of narrative. The differentiation isn't really a thing I've actively foregrounded in games, although it underpins the metaphysics of Changeling in my opinion, but I suggest that it's something you think about when plotting out a story. I don't know what that means.
I think what that means is that Puka is smarter than me.
Yeah.
That's what I get out of that.
Some researchers use etic to refer to objective or outsider accounts, or emic to refer to subjective or insider accounts. Ricardo says, memories, their loss and recovery has been a major plot point in several of my current games. It's a theme I love and has many possibilities to take characters far away in quests, and regarding Mage in particular, getting them deep into themselves. One of the interesting aspects of Mage is how the Mind Sphere allows a Mage to turn their therapy into a quest. This can lead them from chatting with their own id to traveling to the faraway astral realms. It does, however, require a lot of confidence, and I recommend a deep conversation during session 0 to determine it.
I'm just going to go ahead and make a comment on that comment. Your storyteller is not your therapist. If you have issues you should definitely, that you feel require therapy, you should definitely seek out a therapist. Games are fun. games are great for building community, but not everybody at the table has signed up to help you deal with your trauma. So please, before you bring that to the table, make sure that it's something that everybody is interested in discussing.
Torrid says, so to get back to Mage, you may have this powerful demon who is bound to a name in a medieval grimoire. Keeping control of who could summon the demon has been pretty simple in that there are only a handful of written copies. But ever since printing, maybe the NWO has an anti-memetic group whose job is to just garble phonemes, morphemes, graphemes, so that even if you can scan the illuminated manuscript, you can't decipher it or how to actually pronounce it. And I like this as an idea that there's a group within the NWO who actually tries to affect large-scale changes in language and culture to avoid certain memetic hazards, that they do these large-scale weird interventions. And it's like, this is your game where, as an NWO agent, you have to find every book that includes the word runcible or something like that and destroy it, because that is important for some sort of anti-memetic basis. And I feel like every few technocracy games should have a session that is just utterly nonsensical, and I think that that's kind of important to be like, hey, not even we understand why this works.
See, I have the idea that it's the opposite way, where if you flood the market with the idea that this powerful demon can be summoned by just using his true name, and his true name is that's why we no longer pronounce it the. That's why in common parlance it's pronounced the. So every time anybody in the world says the demon pops in, but he's gone immediately because somewhere in Australia somebody woke up and said it's time to get, the eggs for breakfast. And now he's on the other side of the world before he can do anything. So in addition to diluting this meme,
memetic dilution.
Yeah, it's also the demon's just real pissed off, and so when that Val shifts again, he's
remarkably tired.
He's just gonna take a nap for a couple centuries and then wake up just rearing to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we took care of Q&A portion because very few people actually use the things that I indicate, and those are the only ones I read because I'm not going to read everything else. Any other things that you want to kind of drop in before we close out?
I thought I had something, but I've forgotten it, which I think is perfect for this episode.
Yeah. The one other thing that I thought was really interesting is that at a certain point we kind of get this slime creature that you kind of put over your face that acts as a memory barrier that kind of absorbs all incoming memory. So the idea that we have a progenitor angle on this and not just an NWO or a computational one, I kind of like. So you go into your your memory lab, you put on your weird slime creature over, and it prevents you from remembering anything, and it stores it itself. So until you come back and you plop your thing back on, and then you can have all sorts of games where it's like, oh, what if I take another agent's? Is it going to make any sense? This is considered a violation of privacy. How do we interpret that within the union of just kind of like grabbing someone else's memory storage device? But
yeah, there's no way that that's not a violation of privacy.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure the union cares about that so much, but
yeah,
it definitely is
it's violating privacy, but we don't care. And the one other thing was we get this one creature that is a memetic beast that kind of pulls you into a fake reality and consumes you. And they note it as being particularly menacing because you can see it even when you blink, when your eyes are closed. You can still see this creature kind of chasing you down and wandering after you. So the idea of a creature or entity that has a realm that is more or less its digestive tract that has to be escaped in some informatic or memetic way, I thought was kind of interesting.
On the one hand, it's a neat twist. On the other hand, anything that eats you is going to digest you and kill you. So it's a different way out. Yes, that's the twist.
Well, notionally, it's I guess you could say you're in its mouth as opposed to in its throat, depending on how deep we want this metaphor to go. But just something where it's like, oh, this realm is how it consumes people, and this is what we need to escape. And there's any number of stories about a artificial paradise or something that you think you're just being lulled into a false sense of security. And I thought this was just done particularly well.
Oh yeah, if while you're being slowly digested over a period of 1,000 years, you think that you're in whatever your idea of heaven is. Hey, that's great. Why would you try to fight your way out? And the answer is because after 1,000 subjective years, which is 2 minutes of objective time, your body is dead and your brain dies.
No bueno.
But could you last 900 years and then fight your way out?
And with that, Bryce, is there anything you want to bring to listeners' attention?
Yeah, listeners, be sure to tune into Darker Days Radio, which you can find online at darker-days.org. We are currently doing deep dives into various different horror-themed RPGs. We're currently releasing The Old Gods of Appalachia. After that, I think our next one up is going to be Cult. We have some more in the pipeline after that, but if you enjoy horror or miniatures or weird stuff. darker-days.org.
And it seems like the release schedule has increased from like what I remembered it being roughly monthly to being like every other week.
Yes, once we expounded what we see as our remit, we were able to find a lot more to talk about. So when I started, it was specifically a World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness role-playing game podcast. But given that there's a finite amount of World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness, there's only so much to discuss.
I don't know what your problem is. We're on episode 300, and we've never talked about anything beyond Mage. Darker-days.org. And you recently did a Gnosticism episode. If you're interested in that information, kind of tooled around cult, by all means, that is there. And maybe we will have you back to talk about cult, because I need to read cult at some point.
Everybody needs to read cult at some point.
Bryce, thank you so much for joining.
Terry, thank you for having me.
This has been Mage the Podcast, where we haven't mastered memetics, but we're glad our listenership has slowly grown over time. This show is brought to you by our executive producers. You can join them at patreon.com/magethepodcast, where the outline for this episode is available. We have the oracles of the following memories first to thank. Ben Bendelow, oracle of the first time you got 7 ones on 5 dice. Buck Gregory, oracle of the first time you got a whole bunch of 10s and suddenly realized they don't do anything unless you have a specialty. Christopher Phillips, oracle the first time a storyteller had you roll for something incredibly dumb. Guy Stewart, oracle the first time you finished a seeking and you were like, well, that was weird. Jay Widener, oracle the first time you pieced together a mystery way before everyone else. Josh Hillerup, oracle the first time you found out that the way maple syrup was graded changed in 2015 and grade B is now simply known as grade A very dark. Mikhail, oracle the first time you completely missed the mystery even though you had all the pieces and like a sign basically pointing at it. Pooka G, oracle the first time you couldn't remember if you had already done a podcast about a topic because you've done so many of them. Sean Gallagher, oracle the first time you couldn't remember if you ever got an EP shout out. The Crew of Erebus, oracle of the first time you talked to somebody about their Mage game and realized maybe we're not actually all playing the same game. St. UX player, oracle the first time you looked at a character sheet and looked for a trait that wasn't there, like looking for dodge on an M20 character sheet. Jason Vines, oracle the first time you remembered that you used to remember something and now couldn't. And Derek Simsick, oracle the first time you remembered that you forgot something and then remembered it again later. Along with Archmaster Andrew Edelstein, Archmaster Brad the Blue, Archmaster Den Svensson, Archmaster Leroy Bryce, Archmaster Morgan Aran, Archmaster Nathan Weaver, Alex, Alexia, Ambiversion, Andrews S, Anon Badurfi, Berto, Blaze Hibbert, Blake Ryan, Brandon, Bryce Perry, Bub the Pale One, Chris Blake, Sinchotis, Connor Glosson, Daniel Cuppen, Daniel Scribner, Darren Hennessy, David Roy, Dennis Osborne, Eli Levenger, Eric Schwenk, Fragger Rock, George Laura, Great Trillig H, Henry Kraft, Hugo the Bog Person, Ia Bolt, Jason Duncan, Jason Kennedy, Jason W. Breaks, Jay Gatsby, Jeff Bryn, Jen, Jervis Johnson, John Magnuson, Jolyn Andes, Laws and Stuff, Kathleen Halperin, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Chris Kinner, Leslie Weatherstone, Minal Canos, Matthew Prohl, Maurice Hopkins, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Nibiru, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klimanoff, Patrick McNamara, Patrick Mulder, Rachel Grace, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Robart the Robot, Ryan Stray, Rob H., Ryan Kenny, Samuel Tobin, Sployd, Seven S's, Starfish, Stephen Carton, Steve Wynyard, Thrice Great, Tyler Bryan, Vincent Hamilton, Walter, William Connolly, William Martin, and Wolf Larryson. Our EP shoutout is to Kevin Fitzpatrick, who may be one or more of the following. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the journalist, a writer and journalist known for his work in New York City, particularly with articles about the city's history and landmarks. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the engineer, an aerospace engineer that was involved with NASA projects contributing to the development of space exploration technology. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the author, an author known for his writing a book about historical subjects. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the musician, a musician who has been involved in various projects and so on. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the football player, a high school player for Xavier High School in New York who played as running back and middle linebacker. Kevin Fitzpatrick, a discus thrower, an American discus thrower known for his personal best of 65.28 meters. Kevin Fitzpatrick, the Gaelic footballer. I'd like to think that you're all of those Kevins Fitzpatrick and you're just traveling through glorious, glorious time. Next time I think of a Kevin Fitzpatrick, I'll think of the journalist, engineer, author, musician, sports guy. Thanks, Kevin. Rather listen on YouTube, search Mage the Podcast on YouTube to find our full library there. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a Hop in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye.